I think what we'd really like to talk you through this afternoon is our process, the way we work, and to give you a sort of an insight into the way our studio works and through some of the themes which we use. First of all, I have to find the slide advance thing. There we go.
So this first slide gives you a cross-section of all the things that we do in our studio. We're based in London, and we do some interior work, some architecture work, and we also do product design and furniture design. And what we have here on the left is a small architectural project we did last year. On the top right is a sculpture which we did for a public park in London also last year. And then we have some little things, the little black thing at the top, the round circle is actually a product we're working on. And the other one is a piece of furniture.
I think what's quite interesting, actually, coming to this design Indaba and seeing some of the people talking, is how many people work in groups or in couples. And I think people often ask us, why do you work together? And we often ask ourselves the same question. But I think often having two people gives you a completely different perspective on a problem or an issue. And actually, in our case, we clearly have a different perspective, which is a benefit, physically and, I was going to say emotionally, but sometimes emotionally I guess it is, actually. When one person's feeling good and feeling creative and positive and the other one's on a bit of a downer, the other one's quite supportive, it's a good thing.
Now, we met together when we were studying at the Royal College of Art, and we were studying architecture. And we got into furniture in some ways kind of by default, by mistake, really. We were designing interiors and small architectural projects, and we started designing the furniture for these projects. And this is actually an image, slightly abstract image, but an image of the first piece of furniture we ever designed, which is a small coffee table.
But yeah, as Ed said, this was designed for a restaurant, one of our first project out of the Royal College. And obviously we were really, really familiar as architecture students in conveying and describing our ideas in model form, and very often using white card models to generate the forms. So when it actually came to us to start contemplating furniture for our projects, the things which were around on our kind of working landscape were white card, cutting mats, bits of glue. And I think really those materials which we had at our disposal informed the first few pieces of work that we did. And this table, which is a very low table, has a sort of a strange arrangement with its two legs. They sort of slide in, and they create this visual trick, or this sort of strange architectural cantilever. This is really how diagrammed show how it goes together. Yeah,
I mean, we were looking at, in architectural terms, of cantilevers and the way that we could enclose spaces, a bit like a building. So this fits together like so. So you have a kind of loop of material, and then the legs are slid in from either side. And at certain angles, you can only see one leg, so it looks like it's kind of floating.
And really by sort of...
That shows a bit of scale, so you know
I mean, the form,
how small it is.
The form was really designed to, as Ed was saying, really to sort of enclose space. And I think the thinness of it describes a line rather like a sketch. And really its usefulness or its utility as having a secondary storage sort of component was a happy accident. It wasn't something which was really conceived. But what this accidental project meant for us was that it really introduced us to the Italian furniture market through Giulio Cappellini, which really opened our eyes to a whole new type of endeavor, creative endeavor, which we hadn't previously considered, I don't think. So working with Giulio, he asked us actually to develop more projects for the collection, and we were really keen to carry on experimenting with this idea of using very thin material and giving it structure, giving it form, and trying to really minimize the number of components that go together to make something.
So this was one of our sort of experiments. It's a very small table, and what we did was we tried to get the plywood. We were really fascinated working with plywood because although it was a natural material, when it comes in sheet form, you laminate it together. I mean, it's very flexible. It's almost like paper. And when you laminate it, it becomes very solid and very firm. And what we did was, by putting very small folds into the material, you create these beam structures. So at the top there, where you have these little sort of wings that fold up, it creates, it's 5 millimeters thick, but actually by putting those folds in, it gives it real strength. And actually, it's about this size, but you can actually stand on it. It's a very, very strong piece. And then we moved on to bigger pieces. This is a dining table. This shows a detail of the corner. And again, by folding the top, you could create this very, very strong but very lightweight structure.
Which actually was a benefit as well, in terms of its material properties, because it's very, very thin, and because the way that the corners are open, the whole table has the ability to twist. So you know when you're in a restaurant or you have an uneven floor and it's so bloody annoying to have the table shaking around, this actually finds its own position. So it has this natural ability to locate, so it's always a solid surface.
And then we designed some chairs to go with it, again using exactly the same language. And this was getting pretty advanced for us, you know, it's really getting very complicated. But actually we were starting to get a few compound curves into there, which means that the curves run in two different directions at once. And that creates even more strength. So we were fascinated by the language of it, the lightness and the kind of, the sort of linear edge detail that you get on it, but also the structure.
Then taking it one step further, we got out of plywood for a while and created the same form in aluminium as an experiment. So this is just a polished aluminium that's got a clear lacquer over the top, just to see how it translated. You know,
it's very interesting when you change material, when you do the same product. We've only actually done it, I think, twice. When you take a product that you've designed in one material and then transfer it to another, it turns into a completely different thing. And there are less components there. In plywood, you have to make molds for each piece and then join it, whereas with metal, because it's kind of welded, it's seamless. So it has a very different look in tactility as well. So that was our kind of starting point. That was sort of the first couple of years of furniture. This is a project that actually we've done. Finished about a year ago, and we've realised that language we really liked and we've used actually over the years, and we're still kind of working with it.
It's not something that we really want to escape from, but it's not something that we seek either, I have to say. It's something which re-emerges.
Anyway, this project is for H&M, the fashion company H&M, and it's a facade that we've designed for Hong Kong, for a new store in Hong Kong. And they wanted us to, the H&M asked us to try and give them a strong identity on the street that would kind of interpret their brand. So taking what they are, a fashion company, we took the idea of the fabric and the texture and material. So we have this sort of pleated quilting idea. And the other thing was, you know, they're from Sweden, and people's perception of Scandinavian companies is that they are pretty cold. So we wanted this idea of a sort of an iceberg, because this is in a tropical climate. We thought it would be really amazing to have this kind of white iceberg sitting in Hong Kong.
They were pretty uncertain about it actually to start with, and we needed to do quite a lot of persuasion. But the end result was that we, having sort of designed this skin for them, this sort of articulated skin, we had to then think about how it would be throughout the day. And I think in Hong Kong, it tends to get dark pretty early on, doesn't it? Sort of 6 o'clock in the evening.
Yeah, it's sort of year-round. It gets dark about 6. So obviously the shops are open late. They wanted something that was going to look great in the evening as well.
And you know, we were really keen to develop this whole idea of a beacon for them on the street, whatever the country was. They have these fairly generic stores which they rent, they don't own them. And we were really tasked with this brief, which was really to make the most of them. So we tried to think of the ways in which we could make our skin, our aluminium skin, active in the evening. So through perforations and backlighting, we managed to kind of create this more animated.
But we didn't want
display.
the material to be obviously perforated. It had to still feel like a solid white iceberg, but only at night you could actually see that perforation and the light coming through. But as it turned out, a project, the Hong Kong project, we haven't actually completed yet, but another project came up before then, which was in Los Angeles. So that was the first project we actually applied this to.
So you can see here, this is how it looks in the day. And then the transition between day and night.
So you can see the light coming through. It's not all over, it's just in certain places. And if you can see, maybe on the next slide, you can see, so that's the corner there. So it had a, well, we felt anyway, it had a sort of iceberg feel.
But it also had this real crispness which we were trying to get from our earlier furniture work, because it was important to us that we revealed the edge of the material. So where there are openings cut, it was important to us that you could actually get an idea of what it was. It wasn't just kind of amorphous material that had been carved. It actually felt like something which had been crushed or folded.
But also you can see on this one, it's a bit like, you can really see the fabric quality. It almost feels like a curtain. How the way it floats off the pavement.
Going from one-off architecture, we want to take you back down to sort of design, industrial design, and in this case, sort of more of a mass-produced product. This is going to be a light, by the way, in case you're wondering. We became kind of aware that there was a need these days for a sort of stripped down angle poise lamp. Angle poise was, I suppose, developed to for multi-use, for typewriting, for maybe working on a drawing board.
But most people were working up until the last 10, 15 years were working on paper. They were writing, whether it was typing or whether they were actually handwriting or drawing or sketching, or if you're on a drawing board, and you needed this multifunctional, multi-purpose light. But now that everyone works on screens, that is not so useful now. You don't really need the light to go onto your keyboard or onto your screen, because otherwise, actually, it becomes quite annoying and it actually reflects off the screen. So we wanted to design a light that was actually just a focal point that would light an area of your desk or the area of the wall by your desk.
Yeah. Something that would give you reflected light and direct light. That was really, really, really simple to use. We wanted to design something which was a really not complicated product, something which actually explained to you how it was used. And this is a sort of series of slides which just follow the development of this project from these really early, again, folded ideas for the head of the lamp through to our really un-high-tech looking prototypes.
Yeah, I mean, these are things that we make in the studio, and they look very basic and very crude, but it helps us to kind of work through the process. We're really into making stuff, because we feel that's the only way that we can actually move a project on. And
we're really into the sort of mechanics as well, and the way things work. So these were really set up so that we could try the light out, test different lamps, and experiment. This was our sort of first working prototype. I think that was actually that we produced ourselves. We were fortunate enough with this project to be working with one of the, if not the best lighting manufacturer in the world. And so what was incredible of that, and what is incredible, is working with the technicians and the people behind, the scientists really, behind a simple project. And the reason I put this slide in here is to talk about a dilemma which affects, I'm sure it affects lots of designers and architects. And it's the dilemma of what you might call design integrity. When we conceived this project to start with, we always imagined it would be sort of like a cast aluminium head with a folded piece of aluminium that somehow fitted to it. And rather like an aeroplane's wing, we envisaged we'd have this sort of split line. So if you can see the lamp at the top, there's this sort of split line which means the junction between two pieces that comes over the top and along the side. And they really, really liked that language and felt it was really appropriate and really helped balance it.
We felt that it was kind of integral to the design because it really had a lot of the linear qualities that we had in our earlier work. But anyway, what happened in the end was that the process of manufacture didn't actually allow for that. And so that head there is actually now made in one piece. And the manufacturer said, well, maybe we should just put that line in there because it looks really interesting, looks really nice. But in the end, there's no point because there's no point adding it because in the end it was just decoration.
It became fake. I have to say though, we stewed on it for a couple of hours. We really didn't know which way to go, but in the end we had to lose the detail.
So anyway, this is a picture of us. When we work with manufacturers, we actually spend quite a lot of time in there. Unfortunately, this is not our studio, which would be great. This is actually at Floss, the lighting company, and we spend a lot of time there working with the guys there and just working on our own as well.
And it's some part of the process which we absolutely love. We're not the designers who sit there and do a squiggle on the back of a cigarette packet and fax it off somewhere. We really love to be involved in it all the way through and find that sort of cooperation with the people behind the company is really enriching to the process.
And also we get involved, there's a lot of testing that goes on in furniture and product design. Because obviously before things are launched to the market, they have to be rigorously tested so they don't all fail and come back. And what we found really amusing about this was this is a tilting test for the lamp. And it's as basic as it looks. You actually have a platform which tilts like that, and then when it falls, you kind of know it's gone too far.
There are loads of other tests as well, like heat tests, and they're sort of leaving it on in the cardboard box until the cardboard box catches fire and things like that. It's all really terrifying.
This is the underside of the lamp, and traditionally with a halogen lamp, which is what this started off being, you have a metal reflector, gives off a very, very powerful reflected light. But we didn't really like the look of it. It was very hard, and we wanted to have something that was a bit softer, and also something that when you looked at it, it actually had light transmission through it. So what we actually decided to do was have a porcelain reflector. So that kind of U-shaped white thing in the middle is actually made from porcelain.
And it's quite nice, really. It takes its cue from those sort of hard porcelain components that you fit halogen, sort of itchy bits that you put halogen bulbs into. We took that material and glazed it.
We, quite often with furniture, companies like to work with you to develop a sort of family or a range. And Floss were very keen for us to do this because actually the head of the light is very flexible and can be used for wall lights or originally obviously the desk lamp, but there's floor lights and uplighters and all kinds of stuff. So we've worked with them a little bit on that, and we've developed, well, these are the first two. So you've got the floor standing lamp there and the table, the desk, and we've also developed now the wall lamp and a floor standing lamp.
And it was all going really well, wasn't it?
It's all brilliant, and then we designed this light many years ago actually. And then it all looked lovely until the reality of global warming and reducing
carbon footprint.
We had to change the light to an LED version.
So our beautiful porcelain idea was really out of the window. So we were confronted with this, which
this is the first prototype. This isn't it. This isn't it. It's better than that.
It's a bit better.
That was the first attempt. But it was a real change because the light was designed for a single bulb and for the light to project out from there. And LED lights are very, very different. They don't glow. They project light in very directional way. And so we've had to sort of encase all the bulbs. And this is not a great shot, but you can see it's like a sort of cassette that fits underneath there.
It's like a bicycle light reflector on the front. But what's interesting about this, what I found particularly strange about it, was the way it changed the way I saw the product. I always thought a lamp was like furniture, and it was something which, when the bulbs wore out, you could replace them, and the piece would just live forever. You could keep it forever and ever and ever, and it was just the lamp that you changed. But what changed here was that the new generation of LED lights, or LED lamps, technically shouldn't ever really burn out. They should last for, 50,000 years or something.
I think this one lasts for, you get a guaranteed 35-year average usage or something. So the idea is that at the end of 35 years, you just sling it out.
Throw the whole thing away. But even though it's 35 years, somehow for me, it corrupted the concept of a lamp, what a lamp should be, which could be as good as a chair. You ought to be able to keep it forever and ever, which is something we try to do with the work that we produce. It's not something that you just buy and sling out. Anyhow, this is where we are now with LED technology. And
the final thing is that we had the light has been on the market for a while now, and it has this very glossy paint finish. But when we put the LED lights in the base, it was like a mirror. You could see these horrible LED lights So what we've done is we've changed it this doesn't look very matte, but it's actually a matte black finish so that you can't actually see those bulbs underneath. And what was quite interesting fairly recently, we had a launch in Tokyo with Floss, and they designed a show that we weren't involved in at all. And they interpreted this lamp by its folded sort of metal, even though it's not folded metal, it's cast, but it looks like a folded metal. And they interpreted the whole thing as origami. So it was quite interesting how it sort of came back.
One of our other kind of key themes, I think, in our work is that we are heavily involved with craft, lots of different scales of production, mass production, architecture, but also one-off things and batch-produced things. And this project was quite relevant, really, for being in South Africa.
Yeah, this is a project we did in 2001, and we worked with basket weavers, grass weavers, in various different villages all around KwaZulu-Natal. And these products have been on sale for the last, whatever it is, 7 or 8 years. And it was an interesting, these are actually stools that are used for, outside use mainly. I mean, you can be used inside too. But the reason we work with this particular material was because this grass, when it gets wet, actually expands. And so these containers and baskets that they make out of this, actually, when you put, they're used for carrying liquids, water or beer or whatever. So when you actually put the fluid inside, the grass expands and becomes very, very tight, and so the whole thing becomes watertight. So we thought it was a really great material to use for outdoor furniture.
And at the same time we were working in South Africa on those projects, we were also working in Milan, developing other projects, obviously for a slightly different world. But I think there's a kind of interrelationship between this product, which is called the Hula Stool, and the other stools that we were just talking about, in that there's a type of geometry, there's a sort of movement of line through the form. And this, for us, was an experiment in taking flat material, a flat profile, and then, I suppose, repeating it through the form, and then changing it incrementally through the shape. So you have these sort of undulations and dishes, so that it's a rocking chair that you sit in, but it really is comfortable either way up. And then taking that knowledge that we'd learned through working with a craftsman around in the Milan area into another product. This time it's a coat stand for a company called Classicon. But rather than just using the simple cutout pieces of wood, almost looked like they'd been jigsawed, we were really involved in this sort of distortion and twisting, almost steam bending of components.
We tried to get as much of a sort of sculptural feel as we could out of the wood. So actually it looks like it's been stretched and twisted at the same time. And this is another project which really demonstrates when we work with craftspeople. This project was done in Italy at Carrara, and it's made out of solid Carrara marble. And the reason for that is that the base has to be sufficiently heavy so that it allows the top to cantilever out so it doesn't tip over. But what's interesting about the project for us is the way that the base and the table surface connect together, because there's no mechanical fixings at all. It's actually gravity that holds them together. And at the top of the bottle, there's a very, very, very slight conical taper, and that's what holds the top.
It's called the Morse taper.
It's called Morse taper, and it's so precise. It's 1 degree. I know this. It's 1 degree, 16 minutes and 26 seconds. And for marble, different formulas for different materials. And it actually, when you put the top over that cone, it locks completely solid. You can't move it.
Yeah, so you can sort of push on it like this, and it doesn't move at all. But but two people could actually just lift it straight off. It's amazing, and it's really interesting, sort of learning more about the material properties. This is, again, around the same sort of time. We were starting to experiment with this idea of layering. And specifically in this case, we tasked ourselves with the idea of reinterpreting the traditional archetype of what a sofa is. And we all know, well, there's one. The sofa, that has a wooden frame inside it, it's got some foam in it, and there's some bouncy things, and then it's sort of skinned in the upholstery of your choice. But we decided to kind of turn it on its head. And
what happened? What we did? We started with a frame that that was very, very simple, and the aesthetic of it was designed to be very constructional, very, very simple. It wasn't really supposed to be styled in any way. And then by adding these blankets, you built up the comfort that was needed. So, I mean, it took 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we thought, about 6 blankets before it became really comfortable to sit on. But what that gave us the opportunity to play with colour, because originally we started off with 6 of the same colour, and then we thought, well, this is ridiculous, let's try. And then that added a whole other dimension to the piece. And it was really fun, actually.
In fact, I think we started getting quite mesmerised with colour, and it hadn't really been something that we'd used to a great extent before this point. And so we're now sort of starting to explore, as well as this idea of materiality, the idea of multiples, and also the idea of mixing colours together.
And we took this idea of playing with colour a bit further when we were asked to design some seating for the New York Furniture Fair back in 2005. And the sponsor for that was Pantone. So we thought it'd be really great to, I don't know if any of you have seen these colour books that Pantone produce, and they have these little tear-out strips, and at the bottom, so you have a block of colour at the top, just like this stool, in fact. You have a block of grey, for example, and then the code number underneath, and you're supposed to pull them out, and then you can use them to sort of mix colours, and you can show them to the samples for your printer or decorator or whatever. And so we did a range of, well, we had 96 different stools, and each one of them had different colour, and each one had the number, the correct code, colour code printed on the bottom. And it was amazing how the mood of a room changed by moving them around. These were actually positioned on a wall in a gallery in London. And when we set them up, if you just threw them on the wall in a random way, it just looked really crass, it looked really dead. But by moving things around, it became totally alive. And that was something that we really enjoyed doing.
Well, it was quite painful.
No, you don't say that.
Okay. It was quite painful. It was a rewarding process, and we learnt a lot, but it wasn't easy. But I think it became a fascination of ours, this whole idea of colour composition, not actually mixing colours together, but by having them side by side. And
this brings us to the next project, which for us it was a new type of project, really, because we were invited by a company in London called Established & Sons to do a gallery show. They have a gallery in Mayfair in London, and they asked us to do an edition piece of furniture. And we thought this is a great opportunity. Well, traditionally, edition pieces of furniture have been very expensive. And whilst that's not great for everyone, we thought we've got to use this opportunity to work with new materials, new techniques, and actually use it as an experimental process, really.
But obviously well, not obviously, but we strongly feel about the sort of design art world that things should work, they should have a use. So at the back of our minds, we had to think that we needed to do something which could actually have a function, would be able to be useful to somebody.
So what we did was we always wanted to work with anodizing. We found it a really interesting process. It's where colour is, metal, aluminium, is put into baths of colour, and the colour actually eats into the surface of the metal, so it's a sort of permanent thing. It's rather than a coating. It's
like
actually
a dyeing.
Embedded into the material. So we work with anodizing, and this is a range of little anodized colours, and we worked and worked and worked with hundreds and hundreds of colours to develop sort of palettes, I suppose, of colour.
I think it's important to say at the moment, whilst we're developing these colour circles, we have a product in mind. We were thinking of doing low tables with a glass top, so that you could see these sort of rings of colour. But we had no idea what shape they were going to be, and in fact, we'd made the conscious decision. 10 minutes left, okay. Conscious decision to what was it?
No, we work with
unconscious decision.
Unconscious. He is unconscious.
I actually no. I've got it. We made the conscious decision to get the colour right first before you even started thinking about the shape. That's what it was.
Yeah, because traditionally when you design furniture and products, you work on the product and you design the sofa or the light or whatever, and the last thing you do usually is select colours to go with it. So you work with the manufacturer and they say, we've got to have a black and a white, and then you can choose some colours. So we thought we're going to reverse the whole process, start with colour, and then work with shape after that. And so taking one particular colour scheme, which was this sort of bright red that went round to a very, very pale pink.
Actually, sorry, can I interrupt?
Yeah, sure.
Let's go back one. I just wanted to say that, sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a second. The other thing we wanted to do, well, the reason that we wanted them to be circular as well is that we didn't want these things to end, these compositions. We sort of thought about it in terms of music and the way that you have rhythm in music and high points and low points, and this kind of idea that when you look at a form, your eye would just go round and round and round, and I suppose a little bit like the snake in Robin Hood, you know, the Disney thing, when he mesmerises.
No.
Anyway.
Don't know that. Haven't seen that one.
The idea would be that, you know, you'd be captivated with this kind of rhythm, you know, this idea of contrast of colour, and it could almost be a kind of musical experience.
But if you look at the two on the left, they're quite gradual. There's just effectively one colour and then different tones of it. And so what we did is we designed the shapes that we felt were right with those colour ranges. So for example, those softer ones, we had a lot of curves and a lot of radiuses, and they felt quite soft. And more angular ones we felt were appropriate for these colour schemes that were more sort of broken, where you have maybe a very small tonal range and then a really dark colour or a bright colour or even a change of colour. So for example, this shape we felt was about right for this kind of blue, very dark, very light, all changing. Also,
this wasn't really like getting something just sprayed up in the spray shop. When we were talking about anodizing, it's an incredibly complicated process which involves, so like photography, involves heat, involves the time in the bath and the immersion, and it involves density of pigment in the solution.
Right, so we had to work out how these things went together. And it wasn't as easy as it looks, actually. You know, each one of these things had to fit very, very precisely together. So we started in the usual way for us, which is with model making. So we made these sort of polystyrene shapes and see how they all went together. And then we worked, actually there's a little, you can see some sections here.
So this is us actually just making sure that what we'd conceived in terms of the form alone was interesting.
And you can see on these drawings how each segment had 3 different bolts that went into it, because as they slotted together, they couldn't all be in the same place because they wouldn't meet. So,
and what the other thing which was amazing about this is all milled out of aluminium block. Each one of these is machined out of solid aluminium, and the tolerances that the guys were using on these was much more fine than the aerospace technology or the Formula One technology that they were normally using, so that we didn't get any gaps appearing around the perimeter of these forms.
This was actually the prototype, and you can see it was out of solid pieces. And the thing about aluminium, what's great, is if you machine it out of a block, any wastage at all that's machined off there can be completely recycled. And so the later versions here, you can see we've machined out a lot of slots in there because it makes the table obviously a lot lighter, because they're not very light, these pieces.
And then numbering, once you actually check to make sure the whole thing goes together, you know each of the sections is numbered. It has its own number. It's also machined on the inside. And then it goes through this incredibly arduous process of anodizing.
So what happens is the metal's cleaned first in one tank. Then it goes into what is actually the anodizing bath. And what that does is that eats into the surface of the metal and actually covers the surface in shallow hexagonal chambers. And then the third process is, this looks like a bloodbath.
This is the murder stage.
This is actually the pink table. And it goes into the dye. And they have to keep it moving continuously so that you get this constant
And these are really,
colour.
really heavy. So this guy is so super strong because he's just doing this all the time. And the other thing that he's got to bear in mind is that this is a fading table. So each of those has to be in the solution for a varying amount of time.
Finally.
In fact, they were pretty blown away really by the whole thing, weren't they?
That steam is not coming from the tank, it's coming off that guy because he's been doing it for so long.
It's coming from his armpits.
This was the blue table, and this was the nerve-wracking part where you put it all together and see if it actually worked.
And one by one, they went together. Each one screws together, as Ed was saying before, all the junctions are staggered, so they screw together manually until you've got two halves. And then, now these are the green ones.
And when you put these colours together, it's just unbelievable.
It's amazing. They're really iridescent, so as you walk up to them, the great thing about anodizing is, because it's actually within the material itself, it's sort of almost like it shimmers like a butterfly's wing. So you can walk to it and it changes from light blue to dark blue. So the whole thing, becomes active. And then, so you create these two halves, and then you put them together, and you have to use this incredible fixing, which is a secret fixing. Magnetic fixing that you put in. You push the two table halves together.
You can see them here, these sort of brass pieces.
And then you have a drill which has a spinning magnet on the end. And so if you can imagine, you push the two bits together and they've got their sort of mechanical threads hidden away on the inside, and you're holding a drill out here, spinning it, which feels really random. And then inside, the thread's turning and locking the whole thing together. And that's the final.
That's the final result.
And it has a super low iron glass top, so you're barely aware of the glass.
Yeah, that's got a glass top on it. It's very, very difficult to photograph these pieces, but we've got one shot at the end that will hopefully show you how it works.
That's the greeny one. We don't call it the greeny one, by the way.
This is the pinky one, by looking into the top.
Equally dubious. And you can see here where the anodizer unfortunately there, you can see where that idiot didn't anodize it properly, and you've got a bit of a dark stripe there.
But this is the prototype, the real one.
No, I'm kidding.
Great.
He was great.
So this is looking into the center of the blue one. And this final one sort of shows you kind of how it works, because when you put something on the top of that glass, it literally looks like it's levitating, because you don't see the glass at all, and you get a shadow that comes right through.
And that's them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.